Going to give folks a few seconds to join the town hall, and then we will begin. All right, let's get started. All right, hello everyone, and thanks for watching Congressman Andre Carson's listening session town hall live on Facebook. I'm Copeland, Congressman Carson's communications director, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this discussion. Thanks to all who submitted your questions and concerns over the past several days. Tonight, Congressman Carson will be sounding off on your submissions, and we also invite you to submit a question in the comments below during the live chat. Time permitting, the Congressman will do his best to answer those as well. I'm now pleased to turn it over to Congressman Carson.
Thanks, Copeland, and hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, albeit virtual, with all of you to discuss policy priorities for 2022. You know, discussions like this one are so important in our ongoing efforts to create a more perfect union. When we all come together to really talk about our shared goals, it helps invigorate our level of engagement, and it really allows us to work together more effectively. As we start off this new year, it's so important to reflect on all that we have accomplished, as well as the work that lies ahead. It is true that these last 2 years have been very tough. We are now entering the third year of COVID-19. And I know we're all exhausted from this extremely challenging period in our lives. But the good news is that over the last year, we laid the groundwork for better days ahead. We passed the American Rescue Plan, which helped us get through some of the toughest periods of the pandemic. It got vaccines and arms, which saved many lives, and it got kids back in schools across our country. In that same bill, we established an expanded child tax credit, which has dramatically reduced child poverty. We also passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is going to create millions of good paying jobs, repair our crumbling infrastructure, and clean up our environment. In addition, we rolled back many of the bad policies from the Trump years, like the disastrous Muslim ban. And those are just some of the highlights. So this year, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And we're going to discuss many of these priorities in our town hall today. So I'm working hard, and we're working hard to enact good legislation that brings back more resources to the great Hoosier state. I know that the road ahead is going to be tough, but we're not letting up. And these goals are just too important. So I'll continue fighting for good jobs and safer communities and greater rights and opportunities for all. And I know we can make a lot of progress on that this year if we remain united. Copeland, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Congressman. Our first question is from Justin. On Facebook, he writes, what does Congress have planned regarding enabling voting rights nationwide? And so this is one of several questions and comments we received about this issue.
Well, thank you for the question, Justin. I've heard from a lot of folks lately about the vital importance of restoring the Voting Rights Act, and so thankful so many people are engaged on this. You know, for many Americans, especially people of color, really maintaining and strengthening this right has been a struggle since emancipation. In recent years, we have seen many Republican-led states across our country, including Indiana, pass voter suppression bills. Donald Trump's lies about the 2020 election has really accelerated this trend, and states have had an easier time passing these laws because the Supreme Court has effectively weakened the Voting Rights Act of 1965. One of our first priorities has to be restoring the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And that's why the House passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. The Senate has also introduced the Freedom to Vote Act, which is another bill to strengthen voting rights. However, Republican senators have blocked these bills by abusing the filibuster. We saw that last week. That's why another thing we have to do to advance voting rights is to end the filibuster. The filibuster is a tool used by the minority in the Senate to stop debate on a bill that, if that bill doesn't have at least 60 votes in favor of it. And right now we have a 50-50 Senate. So it's really hard to get 60 votes on much right now. The filibuster is the same tool. It's the same tool that Southern senators used to block civil rights bills in the 50s and 60s. And unfortunately, history is repeating itself. State legislatures are passing laws that restrict the right to vote by simple majority, but Senate Democrats can't do the same to pass laws that strengthen the right to vote. Now, think about that. Just recently, we bypassed the filibuster to raise the debt ceiling, but we can't do the same to protect a fundamental vote. So ending the filibuster and passing these voting rights bills are one of my top priorities. And I encourage the Biden administration to do all in its power to protect voting rights as well.
Thank you, Congressman. Justin from Facebook also submitted another question. He asks, is there a plan to discuss nationwide minimum police training requirements to promote de-escalation tactics and reduce police violence, especially against the lower class and minorities?
Well, thank you for the question, Justin. I know firsthand how important it is to improve police accountability and expand training that teaches de-escalation tactics. This will help reduce unwarranted violence by police, but we have to do much more to stop the very senseless killings of Black and brown people at the hands of law enforcement. This is an epidemic, quite frankly, in communities across our country. As a former law enforcement officer, nobody understands the value of policing more than I do, and some others. But I can also tell you stories about the white supremacist elements I saw firsthand in the law enforcement community. And I think it's clear that we have to make a change. That's why the House passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which is a very comprehensive bill that ensures better training of police and greater accountability to hold them accountable for wrongdoing. It also includes a provision that I push for that puts in place more body cams and dash cams. And this is another bill that Senate Republicans are blocking, but we're not giving up. I also want to commend the Biden administration for enacting policies that restrict the use of chokeholds and no-knock warrants by federal officers.
All right, Congressman, the next question is from Amy, and she writes on Facebook, how much money did Indiana receive from the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and how has it been spent?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I want to take a moment to stress the importance of these pieces of legislation, which I proudly voted for, by the way. They are both landmark laws that will effectively change America for the better for years to come. The American Rescue Plan was enacted in March of 2021, and it's a very bold effort to help our country respond to COVID-19. It provides money for schools and businesses, helps millions of Americans get vaccinated for free, and more. And I believe that this legislation helped save countless lives and has brought America back from the brink, quite frankly. About a year ago, around 1% of adults were fully vaccinated, and nearly half of our schools were closed. Today, nearly 75% of adults are fully vaccinated, and 95% of schools are open. And this progress did not happen by itself. It's because of the American Rescue Plan, quite frankly. The Infrastructure Investment Act was passed in November of last year. And it's really a once in a generation investment in our transportation networks and infrastructure And these aren't just investments in roads and bridges. It's also drinking water, high-speed internet, aviation, and so much more. It's going to create millions of good paying jobs, but it's also going to improve our environment by cleaning up, polluted sites. And really, this is a game changer. The final impact of these bills will be felt for years to come. For example, the infrastructure law is providing over $400 million to Indiana, the great Hoosier state, over the next 5 years to help upgrade our own bridges. The American Rescue Plan, it provided about $735 million to Marion County alone, which is where Indianapolis is housed for those who are outside of the state watching. And over 3.3 million Hoosiers receive stimulus payments from the American Rescue Plan. That's how fantastic this legislation is. And we had over 1.3 million children in Indiana who benefited from the child tax credit, which is also included in the American Rescue Plan. There's still much more to do, but these two bills have helped our state out tremendously.
Thank you, Congressman. The next question is from Twitter, and it's from a user whose name is N95's Save Lives, which is very true. And she asks, or they ask, what can be done for immunocompromised and disabled people stuck at home due to a complete lack of COVID precautions in Indiana? That's my biggest concern. I'm immunocompromised and I want a life back.
Well, thank you for that question, and really for reminding folks that our pandemic is far from over. We all know that countless people remain at high risk from severe complications of COVID. And I personally want to encourage all Hoosiers to do their part, like getting vaccinated and boosted and wearing a mask. And I want to urge our local and state leaders to do everything they can to help end the pandemic and not polarize what should be public health decisions and not partisan fights. Public health must be a bipartisan priority. And I'm really heartened by President Biden's efforts to send free COVID tests to every household. You can order up to 4 per household by visiting covidtest.gov. That's covidtest.gov. In addition, the American Rescue Plan has provided our state with a lot of funding for vaccines and testing, and these really help a lot, but only if people utilize these resources and take this pandemic seriously. This pandemic, it won't last forever, we know that, and it will end faster if we can all do our part to stop the spread of the virus, however we can.
Thank you, Congressman. The next comment is from Twitter. His name is Dan, and he writes, with COVID, insurrection, voting rights, and Build Back Better, he believes the existential threat remains climate.
That's an important point, Dan. Thank you. I agree that climate change remains one of the most pressing global threats, and nothing else matters if our planet is uninhabitable. The Trump administration severely rolled back the Obama-Biden accomplishments for the environment. But now fortunately, we've turned a corner this year, and I'm grateful that President Biden put America back in the Paris Climate Agreement, where we can be a leader in the global effort to fight climate change. I also commend him for nominating Hoosier, fellow Hoosier, Janet McCabe, to serve as the Deputy Administrator for the EPA. The Build Back Better Act, which the House passed, also contains very strong climate provisions. Now, unfortunately, our beloved planet Earth is literally on the brink of a climate catastrophe. So we've been urging our congressional colleagues and the Biden administration to do everything we can to save and protect our planet. This includes ramping up the transition to renewable energy. It should be one of our top priorities. And I think that the fact that automakers, particularly the big three, have stated in the next decade, their entire fleet will be fully electric. We still have to do more in terms of raising our CAFE standards, our fuel efficiency standards, where we can get more mileage per gallon or more mileage per charge when it comes to electric vehicles. But I think we're there. But there's so many pieces to this climate change puzzle. So we're urging folks to contact their representatives and senators to get them to do the right thing.
All right, Congressman, our next comment is from Xander on Instagram, and he says the two biggest issues he'd like your take on are minimum wage and immigration reform.
Well, Xander, these are two very important issues. You know, we need to raise the minimum wage. I strongly support the effort to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. No one who works full time should be living in poverty. The current staffing issues, they're no surprise to me or anyone else. We have frontline workers who have been risking their lives for the last 2 years for paychecks that aren't making ends meet. And, you know, we need to pay every American worker a living wage. I'm also very supportive of reforming our broken immigration system to provide a pathway to citizenship for people like dreamers. You know, these young people have lived in this country nearly their entire lives and are as American as anyone else. You know, I've had the honor of meeting so many in our community, and they're doing a fantastic job. That's why I support legislation like the Dream and Promise Act, which protects dreamers and other qualifying groups from deportation. You know, the House passed it this year, and I proudly voted in favor of it. Immigrants, they enrich our community, they enrich our state, and they enrich Indianapolis. So I remain committed to keeping our doors open to folks in need of opportunity, safety, and freedom. And we can do this while also keeping our borders safe.
All right, Congressman, our next question comes from Bob, who writes on Facebook. Can there be some other way to help those on fixed incomes with groceries? Today's prices are outrageous and our food budget has grown exponentially for the same items. What was once a viable and ample grocery budget has turned into a change in diet and hard times at the end of the month. We do not qualify for food stamps. We need some other form of government assistance.
You know, Bob, I'm so sorry to hear about your situation. Unfortunately, many other Hoosiers and Americans, quite frankly, are in the same boat. You know, right now we are experiencing a rise in inflation. This is largely a result of the fast economic rebound and the growth we've experienced this year, plus the pandemic-related supply chain issues. Now, if we continue to do what's necessary to end the pandemic and stabilize our economy, I believe many of our supply chain and inflation issues will improve significantly. The Biden administration has also used many tools at its disposal to fix these supply chain issues. The new bipartisan infrastructure law will also improve things by updating and strengthening our transportation networks. But even before the pandemic, healthy foods were already out of reach for millions of Americans. Food insecurity is a big problem that I've been working to fix. I have a bill called the Food Deserts Act, which creates a program that allows the USDA to encourage local business owners to open up grocery stores in underserved communities. Now, this bill will help solve the systemic problem of these big box retailers not setting up shop in lower income neighborhoods. And another thing it will help is increase the cost of living adjustment for seniors that just went into effect by the Biden administration. And this is the biggest increase in nearly 40 years.
Thank you, Congressman. This is actually, we actually had several comments on Facebook about loan forgiveness and reducing the burden of student loan debt. Folks would like to know what can be done.
Well, thank you for those questions and comments. I agree. I've been on record for years saying that more needs to be done to alleviate the burden of student loan debt. I believe education is a building block of success, and it needs to be more affordable. I'm very open to efforts to lower the cost of secondary education that include things like trade schools. I also commend President Biden for pausing student loan payments until the spring. He has also canceled billions in student loan debt for certain borrowers. He has introduced new rules for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which will effectively make it easier to qualify. So there's a lot more that needs to be done to ease this burden, and we're open to many solutions, including forgiving debt for more borrowers.
And finally, Congressman, from the questions we received, we had a lot of folks who want to know about the issues of UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, and greater transparency around this national security issue. What are your plans on this?
Well, I want to thank all of the Hoosiers and folks around the country and the world, quite frankly, who have supported our efforts and my efforts to get answers on UAPs, which effectively are unidentified aerial phenomenon, or they're popularly known as UFOs. I think that this topic is something that has been placed in the science fiction category. However, the occurrence of UAPs near our military bases has been documented and poses a national security threat, especially since so much about them is virtually unknown. They could be a form of technology that we don't have, or from another place, which is concerning. And yes, it might even be extraterrestrial life forms. The problem is people want to know, and they want answers. Last year, I conducted a closed hearing on this issue on the House Intelligence Committee, where I serve as the chairman of the Counterterrorism Subcommittee. And I'd like to have a public hearing this year so we can have a larger discussion about this without compromising our national security concerns. Good question.
All right, thank you, Congressman. And during the chat, we've also had some live questions come in. And if you don't mind, I'll read you a couple. The first one is from Erin. She says on Facebook, President Biden mentioned he would like to see over 200,000 electric vehicle chargers over the next 10 years. Do you think this is attainable? And what do you think about automakers moving to all electric fleets?
Well, that's a great question, Aaron. Thank you for your question. I think President Biden's EV agenda is very ambitious. It's one which I support. We have a few EV charging stations in Indianapolis, and we're getting more. My hope is, as automakers are attempting to have fully electric fleets in the next decade, that will get us away from our dependence on foreign oil, which in turn gives us greater leverage, and it relieves us from having to struggle when it comes to getting gas as a result of global markets and dictators who are hostile toward our country.
All right, and we have one more question, Congressman. Megan on Facebook asks, she wants to know what a day in Congress looks like.
That's a great question. No one day is like the other. Meetings or hearings typically start very early in the morning, so I try to work out and eat breakfast and go to the Hill, or if I'm in Indianapolis, take meetings and meet with constituents. I sit on both the Transportation Committee and the Intelligence Committee, and I sit on two subcommittees of those committees. They keep me very busy. The Intelligence Committee, we're not required to have electronic devices, so no phones, tablets, or watches that transmit signals. And those meetings last a considerable amount of time, and they're top secret. But after that, I could be meeting with an executive from Eli Lilly, from a local CEO to our friends in organized labor, or wait staff at a local restaurant, talking about issues, talking about concerns, talking about things that matter to our state, to our city, or to our world. And it also means meeting with folks from different walks of life, from different countries, talking about ways in which our legislation can benefit them. We often meet with constituents dealing with employment matters, dealing with our economy, dealing with education and what the future of education may look like, dealing with the discussion about electric vehicles. As many of us, myself included, I drive hybrids. I'm transitioning and hopefully to be fully electric, to not just vote on it, to be active in the discussion. But no one day is alike. It could mean working with our brilliant caseworkers and trying to get a constituent back into the country. It means our caseworkers working very hard, helping someone with their Social Security benefits, or talking to the VA about a local issue. It could be me sitting with locally elected officials and seeing ways in which the federal government can be a greater help to local government and state government. It could mean sitting with the superintendent of state police, Marion County Sheriff, Chief of Police, or the mayor, working through criminal justice matters and seeing ways in which we can bring greater funding to help law enforcement and to help citizens and activists who have critiques against law enforcement as well. So no one day is alike, but it is truly an honor to be elected to serve. I take the job very seriously, as do my coworkers and the team at Team Carson and many of our colleagues. And it means also reaching across the aisle, talking to Republicans, seeing ways in which we can work on legislation in a bipartisan way. An example of that has been criminal justice reform, where we've spoken to Republicans who are of like mind and looking at ways in which we could use taxpayer dollars very wisely to bring about prison reform and criminal justice reform. So there are a plethora of issues and concerns. No one day is alike, but it's certainly an honor, especially during the pandemic in this virtual environment. You're able to have more meetings, for better or for worse, for some people who are zoomed out, but it gives us a chance to interact with people virtually. And, we have a staff of, Xers, millennials, and zennials who they do a fantastic job, and we learn from one another. I certainly learn from them every day, and it's truly an honor to serve.
Thank you, sir. I think we're out of time. So do you have any closing words?
Well, I want to thank you. We plan on having more of these throughout the year. I know the pandemic has made it more challenging to do these things in person, but so we want to keep people safe in many ways for security reasons too, but we love this interactive effort, so there will be more, and I want to thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Good job, Copeland.
Thank you, sir.